And Patrick's girlfriend was going to join him on the call, but decided not to at the.
Does she pay a lot of money in taxes?
Um, she, I don't think she's been taxed yet. Yeah.
Okay, so she's not really being taxed, and she's probably gaining more benefits from government than she's paying in taxes, like a lot of people do, right?
Yes.
Now, if there does turn out to be, let's take a hopefully never happen worst case scenario. Let's say that there's some kind of civil war in Europe between Muslims and non-Muslims, as there has been in, I don't know, dozens of other countries where Muslims have come in. Let's say that there is a civil war. Will she be drafted?
She will not be drafted.
She will not be drafted. All right.
Yeah.
So she's not paying any money to house the migrants, and she's not exposed to any risk of being drafted should things turn ugly, right?
Yeah.
So why would we bother listening to her at all? She's got no skin in the game. She's got nothing. I wouldn't take stock advice from people who don't have any money in the market.
Yeah. What do you think about her ability to see the consequences of the future? That if a Muslim immigration would result in Sharia law, for instance, that she would have to have a burqa on and be subject to male violence against her and, in general, losing her freedom.
She's already living in a totalitarian ideology in that she is not free to even listen to counter evidence to her emotional prejudices. So she's already a fundamentalist of feels, right? Which is not uncommon in women. The fundamentalism of feels, that is what is so common in these areas. And the fundamentalism of feels, I feel, I'm offended, I'm upset, you're heartless, you're cold. I don't care about people's feelings fundamentally. It's not the job of a philosopher. A philosopher must deal with facts, objectivity, reason, and evidence. Political correctness is a form of emotional totalitarianism. It's punitive totalitarianism. It is, you damn well toe the left-wing party line, or we will screw you up. So the reason why Europe does not see the danger of fundamentalist Islam is because it has spent a generation or two not fighting the fundamentalist leftist totalitarian ideology of political correctness. Where you can't say basic facts about race and IQ, gender and IQ, the bell curve. I mean, the list goes on. You can't criticize the prophet. You can't criticize leftists, feminists, multiculturalists, race realist deniers. You can't criticize global warming. You can't. So freedom of speech has already been stripped from the vast majority of important topics in the West. There is no practical freedom of speech for the vast majority of people. And I get these messages all the time, and I'm sure you feel it too, where people say, well, I'd like to speak out about it, but I could get a visit from the police. I could lose my job. I could lose my income. I could lose my family. I could lose my freedom. I could lose my reputation. I could, right? So the most important issues in the world, civilization, fork in the road, barbarism versus a continuation of civilization, these topics, there is no functional freedom of speech because we turned over the universities to the leftists. Now, I've made the case, if you wanted to hear this, that if you do want to help the migrants, then it is far cheaper and far more efficient and effective to help them in the Middle East than to bring them to Europe. You can help 12 families. For every dollar you spend, you can help 12 families in the Middle East for every one family you bring to Europe.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, they share the language, they share the climate, they share the culture, they share the history, they share the religion. Particularly Saudi Arabia, right, which has huge tent cities for the pilgrimages to Mecca, air-conditioned, lovely, could take in all of these people and won't. And won't. And in fact is funding to build mosques in Europe. Why? Why? Because Islam has already expanded into dozens of countries. It's like 58 or 60 countries that Islam has moved into and taken over. Does Europe really think they're done? It's a worldwide ideology. It is the religious equivalent of communism. It is a worldwide full dictatorship. It is not cultural in terms of its local. It is a universalist philosophy or
Yes.
ideology, like communism. Communism was a world conquering ideology. And Islam is a world conquering ideology which has been at war with Europe for 1400 years. And the idea that they're just going to stop? I mean, all you have to do is listen to what the imams are saying, that they are looking forward to going to Europe, having lots of kids, destroying and destabilizing the countries by driving deficits and debts and bankruptcies, and then taking over. Again, does this mean every Muslim? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Lots of people, even in the Nazi party in Germany, really opposed Nazism, but were just kind of there because they wanted to survive and didn't want to get shipped off to a concentration camp. It doesn't matter. You don't look at the individuals, you look at the ideology. And it is truly tragic what has happened to the Middle East. And partly it is the fault of people in the Middle East, and partly it is the fault of Western powers. So if your girlfriend wants to do something intelligent rather than just preen herself morally and destroy her own civilization potentially because she wants to have moral good feels in the moment, then she needs to start advocating for a non-interventionist foreign policy in Europe and in North America. Bring the troops home, get the troops out of Saudi Arabia, stop all this nonsense, disentangle, disengage, everybody, back to your corners. That's how it has to work. And there were, of course, long-lasting cultures and civilizations in the Middle East, and there are tragic examples, of course, of more secular and more progressive cultures relatively recently in the Middle East, like in Iran, and certainly in places in Iraq in the 1950s. Women could go to college and become professionals, and this fundamentalism has come out for a variety of reasons. Yeah. Some of it is local, and some of it is Western imperialism. There are other factors involved as well. But Europe needs to go home, and America needs to go home. Yeah. We can't spend the rest of eternity trying to hold back irrational and now violent warring tribes. Can't. I mean, the longer that the Europeans stay there, the more aggression there is in the Middle East, the more traumatized people in the Middle East get, and the more traumatized they are, the more violent they'll become. And Europe's intervention and North America's continual interventions into the Middle East is just creating these endless gruesome cycles. So Saddam Hussein was really bad, but he was pretty much better than ISIS. And so they say, well, we'll take out Saddam Hussein, and then they'll be just like us. You see, people in the Middle East, people in Iraq, they're just like us, except they have a dictator. And so if you get rid of the dictator, then it'll be like when Germany got rid of, or the Allies got rid of Hitler in Germany. Ah, look, now they've become just like us. No, that's not how it works in the Middle East. There's a different culture. There's a different biology in the Middle East. There is consanguinity, which is cousin marriage, which shaves 10 to 16 to 18 IQ points off the entire population, which means that people in the Middle East in general have lower IQs than American blacks. And American blacks aren't doing that well and have not integrated and have not flourished in Western society. And, part of that is due to historical legacies. Small part of that may be due to some vestigial racism, but a large part of that is due to the fact that there is standard deviation on average below Westerners or whites in IQ. So it's not going to work. Bringing low IQ populations with extremely irrational and aggressive ideologies into Western civilization, it literally is like opening the tiger cage on Children's Day at the zoo. From 2003 to 2012, we'll present, quote, what British Muslims really think on Channel 4 on Wednesday. An ICM poll released to the Times ahead of the broadcast reveals, quote, 1 in 5 Muslims in Britain never enter a non-Muslim house. 39% of Muslims, male and female, say a woman should always obey her husband. 31% of British Muslims support the right of a man to have more than one wife. 52% of Muslims did not believe that homosexuality should be legal. 23% of Muslims support the introduction of Sharia law rather than the laws laid down by Parliament. Writing in the Times on the issue, Phillips admits, quote, liberal opinion in Britain has for more than 2 decades maintained that most Muslims are just like everybody else. Britain desperately wants to think of its Muslims as versions of the great British Bake-Off winner, Nadia Hussein, or the cheeky chappy athlete Mo Farah. No idea who those are. But thanks to the most detailed and comprehensive survey of British Muslim opinion that conducted, we now know that just isn't how it is. And, we can link to the article. You can read more. And the numbers are much higher. I mean, these numbers are shocking enough, but the true numbers are much higher for the simple reason that Islam perfectly permits lying to non-Muslims to advance Muslim causes. So these are just the honest Muslims who I guess are not following Islam as much as they should, or maybe they're moderate Muslims. And he also said, we estimated that the Muslim population of the UK would be approaching 2 million by 2020. We underestimated by nearly 1 million. And he said, for a long time, I too thought that Europe's Muslims would become like previous waves of migrants, gradually abandoning their ancestral ways, wearing their religious and cultural baggage lightly, and gradually blending into Britain's diverse identity landscape. I should have known better. Well, you didn't need to read tea leaves or be able to see through a time tunnel into the future. You just needed to read some history. And what is terrible, he says, Mr. Phillips even acknowledges that the mass sexual grooming and rape scandals that are plaguing heavily Muslim-populated towns across Britain are because of Muslim, not Asian men. Right? Like in Europe, they say that the criminals are men of southern complexion, whatever that means, right? So he writes, the contempt for white girls among some Muslim men has been highlighted by the recent scandals in Rotherham, Oxford, Rochdale, and other towns, but this merely reflects a deeply ingrained sexism that runs through Britain's Muslim communities. In a nod to those who have long protested this to be the case in the face of political, media, and even police cover-ups. And left-wing columnist Yasmin Alibahai Brown told him, quote, we liberal Muslims are a dying breed. In 10 years, there will be very few of us left unless something really important is done. Phillips comments, some of my journalist friends imagine that with time, the Muslims will grow out of it. They won't. And so, yeah, I mean, look, the first wave of Muslims, I mean, there are 3 waves to Muslim conquering of other countries. The first, of course, is that when Muslims are very much in the minority, they are instructed to say that Islam is a religion of peace and to be as nice and as pleasant to the host country as possible and to create good impressions of Muslims with the hopes, of course, of the governments allowing more Muslims in. Oh, look, they're wonderful, they're great, and so on. And then they start to challenge, right, as their numbers grow and their influence increases, they start to challenge, create their own sort of separate Sharia law, no-go zone communities and so on. And after that, there's just a general aim for taking over. This is what a listener to this show wrote recently. And I hope this is not going to come true, but this is somebody much more experienced in these matters than I am. And he wrote, here is what will happen to Europe. Remember Yugoslavia and how it ended in a bloody war between Orthodox Serbs, Catholic Croats, and Muslim Bosniaks? Now remember that Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks are of the same origin, the same group of people. They speak the same language. They have the same mentality. They have been living with each other for over 1,000 years. They are genetically the same. And they have the same culture, except for religion. Yugoslavia was first European Union, and it ended because of the USA, but that's a different story. Now you have immigrants that are completely of a different origin, different mentality, different ethnically. They speak a different language, and a lot of them hate Europeans, and there are lots of other differences. When their numbers get high enough and they can feel their strength in numbers, then everything is going to go to hell. You ask why? Because they will be discriminated against by Europeans, which will make them angry. Let's put it simply like this. It will be the biggest massacre in human history. They will not win, of course, but tens of millions of Europeans will die in the conflict. We Serbs are soon joining Russia, so I can say only one thing. Good luck and goodbye. So majority of Muslim students thinks Brussels terrorists are heroes, say teachers. Teachers working in the predominantly Muslim districts of Molenbeek and Schaerbeek in Brussels have reported that 90% of their students, 17 and 18 years old, called the Islamist terrorists who attacked Paris and Brussels heroes. So there's two possibilities, Patrick. Either you are this absolutely terrible, horrible, racist, selfish, cold-hearted human being, which I guess begs the obvious question, why is she with a bad person? If you really are the bad person that she says, then you need to leave her because you're toxic and destructive and a horrible human being. Right? Now, if you're not a bad human being, then she's calling you all of these horrible names unjustly. And then my question is, and excuse my bluntness here, Patrick, why the fuck does she have infinitely more compassion for Muslim illegal immigrants than she does for her own boyfriend of 3 years? Where's all this famous compassion for you?
You're right. Wow, I don't even know.
If she's willing to viciously attack you and sympathize with those who wish to dominate and control her, and wife abuse in Islamic communities is ridiculously high. And also, I think it was like 99% of Egyptian women, 95 or 99% of Egyptian women have complained about being sexually harassed.
Yeah.
So if she loves Muslims and hates you, you can't possibly convince me that she is a rational and empathetic human being. It's not that she doesn't care about you. It's just that there are so many people in the world, I think more women, but that's not particularly important right now. There are so many people in the world who mistake virtue signaling with virtue. And they take a stand that is moral in nature. So she's taken a stand that it is moral to help these refugees. They're hard done by people who need love and food and shelter and support, and then they will be nice, wonderful, integrated, culturally enriching, adding to the stained glass diversity, cathedral view and picture of European civilization. So she has taken a moral stand that it is moral to help these people. It's a Good Samaritan scenario, if you know your Bible. And therefore, to oppose helping these people is immoral. Now, it has been my experience and distinct observation, and you can run it through your own set of memories and current experiences, that when people take a moral stand, they become immovable. Immovable. They cannot admit they're wrong. They cannot back down. They cannot change their mind. And no amount of evidence will sway their opinion. They become fixed. There's no wiggle room. They're backed into a corner and there's no room to maneuver. So it's not even that she doesn't care about you. It's just the way that you're arguing or the way the information that you're presenting goes smashing up against an absolute sentimental fundamentalism of feels-based moral absolute. And she can't ever be talked out of that moral absolute any more than you could be talked out of opposing slavery or pedophilia or whatever. Does that make sense? The best way to live forever as a slave is to unite your life with someone who cannot admit that he or she is wrong, who cannot retract, who cannot apologize. If you are with a person who cannot admit that she is wrong, who cannot apologize, and promise to change her ways and make strong efforts to improve, you will live your life as a slave to their tyrannical feelings, opinions, and prejudices for the rest of your natural days. And you might as well be in a Soviet gulag of conformity to crazy.
Why I might be struggling so much in my educations, because I'm actually really struggling to learn maths, and I'm currently doing programming, but I have done IQ tests and I score pretty high. I wonder why I'm struggling with my educations then.
Because your relationship sucks.
Okay.
No, it's exhausting and debilitating.
Wow.
To be in a relationship with a woman who's calling you a cold-hearted racist, refusing to apologize, sympathizing with groups that you believe are very destructive, that is a contradiction in your life, and contradictions drain energy. You don't know what you can do, my friend, when you are truly, truly loved. When you are truly loved and respected, you have no idea what you will actually be able to do with your life. Right now, you're like someone carrying a cow saying, wow, human knees are designed really badly because I'm shaking, they're hurting, I keep falling over.
Okay.
And you don't know how fast you can run if you drop the cow.